It looks like you have like a really cool filter on.
I have a background, but the filter, yeah, no, this is like, I'm just very pink. That's all.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for
I've
having
been
me.
I've been a bit nervous.
What are we going to talk about? I was thinking about like, what you've got on deck, and I don't even know.
Well, you know what? One thing I've always said about us is that we have good conversations regardless.
True.
And there's so much going on right now, and we haven't spoken in a while. And
It's
I
been like
felt like,
months. It feels like since Thanksgiving, I think. It's been a long
yeah.
time.
So I feel like um, we would just jump right in and like pick up where we, just usually go. Like there's so much.
Yeah.
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 How have you been?
I'm good. I'm doing a lot of Schadenfreude right now.
A lot of what?
Schadenfreude, enjoyment of other people's suffering. Yeah.
Is this a new thing?
There's a word for that. There is a word for that. The Germans have a word for everything. Schadenfreude. It is the first time. I think actually I will say I did have one moment of unmitigated joy when I woke up and Raphael Warnock and had won. Like, and I
Yeah.
was like, wow, that's amazing. And I think we got like what 2 hours of that before it all fell apart. But that was,
Do you think that was a part of it too, right?
I don't think so. I think
At least a part of the energy, like we're losing everything.
yeah, but the upside. So if I may, like this is definitely a silver lining in a shit sandwich, if you'll allow me to mix my
Mhm.
metaphors. Um, is all these people are like losing their jobs, and everyone is like, no, I don't want anything to do with them, and like they're awful. And I'm like, yeah. Welcome to 4 years ago or 10 years ago or 30 years ago when all these people were already awful. So there's a lot of schadenfreude right now, which is not the best. It's not something to be uh, proud of exactly, but you get your jollies where you can when things are so weird and unusual.
Did we see any of this coming? Was this a
Yes,
complete
yes.
surprise? Like,
No, not at all. Not at all.
I mean, we've had like bits of violence here and there, little pockets.
I read a book a couple of years ago about the white evangelical Christian movement, and the way they described like the entire purpose of the enterprise. It was not like, the golden rule or, you know, anything that Jesus might have had to say. It was all making soldiers for Jesus.
Okay.
So have many children and, buy guns
But it's
and
like the war against evil, I guess.
yeah, yeah. So in a very literal way,
Right.
like in a very literal way, soldiers for Jesus, which of course not for Jesus, but for,
I see
the dog whistle of white Christianity, which is like,
that.
it's just a racist,
So
weird,
one
crazy.
of my weaknesses and strengths is that like I don't get too much into the news. And like I know like there's always some headline, like I just feel like it's so draining for me to try to keep up with who said what today, what was their response tomorrow, and this is based on yet like it drains my energy, all of
No, I
that
think I
political
think you're
stuff.
right about that, but I think that you can look at sort of the longer story, which
I
is
I, I check in, I see what's going on, I absorb it, and then I have to step back,
right.
and I just kind of dip in when I can, and usually it's when the news reaches me. I don't go looking for it. So like everything that happened this week, of course, it was everywhere.
Yeah.
But for me, there was two levels. There was a part of me who was like, "Oh, this isn't really serious." Like, they got carried
You
away and
always
just
do that though. You always do
bursted through the
that.
door.
Yeah, you are the man who's always like, well, maybe it's not so bad. And I appreciate that about you. You're very even keeled, like the news, you're like, well, everything will pass,
Yeah, it kind of seemed like they were marching to the Capitol. They weren't like serious about doing something, but then, it got carried away.
Yeah, I don't think that's true at all. Like
As opposed to, we got these bombs and we're about to blow up the Capitol. We're going to
yeah,
take who we can. We're going to be killing all the like, I don't think.
I think if you only watch the video of them milling around, that's a reasonable conclusion to come to. When you start listening to the interviews and taking it in the context of, you know, I mean, I honestly, I'm from a very different point of view. I basically think that everyone who entered the building should have been shot, like that.
But
Like,
see, that's
don't
what
you
I'm
think so?
saying. There's two sides to it. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
what's the name of that girl who was like, they maced me? Who is that? What's her name?
I don't know.
But she wasn't there for anything. Like, she was just following the vibes through the
No,
door.
that's not right. If you listen to
She wasn't gonna kill anyone. That's my point.
that's not what they said about themselves. So this is one of those things where, like, if you actually look at what they actually say about themselves, it's very different than how the media talked about it. So
Right.
they literally were like, no, we're going to go overthrow the government right now.
But Mariah, let me be clear. Like I said, there's two sides.
No. Hang on. Let me just finish the thought. They said in plain language, we are going to Washington to overthrow the government.
So were they going to kill people? And
who cares? Whether or not they killed people is irrelevant. They were going to overthrow the democratically elected government. That is treason, and it's not cool. Like, we're a democracy. We're not like, this is not the Roundheads in 1650. This is like, we have 250 years of, relatively peaceful transfers of power. And this is, if we don't do something about this, then the message is do it again. Maybe next time you'll be successful.
So the other side of what I was saying is that it is very serious.
Mm-hmm.
Serious to the point where I do think we should be taking it like serious terrorist actions.
I think, like, I'm talking like hangings, man. I'm saying old school justice. There's no, these people deserve no mercy. They're trying to overthrow our government. And I feel a certain amount of sympathy in as much as they're part of a cult. So, in as much as the brain is a funny thing, and we've, there have been these people who had something to gain from developing this cult, like, that's not their fault. It's not their fault that they are part of a cult. But the cult worked because they're at heart bad human beings. Like, you don't end up where they are without being essentially dark in your soul. Right? The thing that motivates them is what's that?
Why were some of the security guards open doors for them?
Yeah, well, 2006, you go back to 2006, and the FBI writes a memo to George W. Bush, and he says the military, the police, and even the intelligence agencies, the FBI, CIA, have been compromised by white supremacy. And nobody did anything about it. That's 15 years ago. 15 years ago, it was already true that those organizations were compromised by white supremacy, by associations with.
So are we taking it seriously enough?
We'll see. I mean, I'm not going to jump to conclusions just yet.
I saw that Olympic athlete, he got arrested.
He should be, yeah.
And I mean, no, he's an Olympian, so that puts it like he's American, Yeah. He's not just some Joe Schmo.
Well, I think that he had lost his way in a lot of ways. One of the things that I've noticed about a lot of the people in my life who, men who had become very amenable to these sort of violent leanings, often it happened right after they'd gotten divorced or lost a job, mostly divorced though. The close association of these white supremacists and, you know, divorce, domestic violence, etc. It's very tight. It's actually really, really tight. You know, one could say, like, my belief is that if we just said anyone who has ever been involved in a domestic violence situation cannot get a gun at all, you're prevented from getting a gun, you would immediately cut down on the hate crimes toward everybody, not just women, but like everybody, by a massive amount. Like, you would undermine the ability of these groups to have any power, because these people are angry that they're, what they think of as theirs, their women, their money, their, you know, their power over other people. Yeah. And I think it often happens in these transitional times where their expectations haven't been met. So I had a very good friend, a guy I dated in college, who I'd maintained a friendship with for many years, who had been in the National Guard in college, and had maintained his friendships with all these military people. And, you know, we had differences of opinion. He was a little bit more libertarian leaning, a little bit more, you know, just leave me alone kind of guy. Somebody who didn't really appreciate the whole, like, the way in which communities function as sort of organisms, and nobody really does anything alone, even if you think you do. But those, you know, like, that aside, he was like a pretty good guy. And then he got divorced. And after 20 years of friendship, he was like, you know, I can't believe that as a white man, I'm not allowed to stand up at a, you know, Black Lives Matter rally and take the microphone. And I was like, it's not your rally. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, you have 5 minutes that you can't shout over everyone else. Maybe back up for like 5 minutes.
Maybe he should be listening.
What's that?
Maybe he should be listening.
Yeah. Which is what I said, you know. I mean, there are times to speak, but there are also times to listen. And humility is so important, you know. I mean, and I say this as somebody who's full of opinions. I'm like, I've got 100 opinions for everything and everyone, you know, and I recognize that. But there are definitely, like, there are sort of big red flag moments where you just say, listen, I probably don't know about this as much as you do, or you do, or you do. Like, I don't obviously know that much about this. And I think a lot of men, not just white men, but a lot of men are just really have a hard time with that. Like, sort of stepping back and saying, you know, maybe I don't know about this. Maybe I just need to relax and kind of spend some time listening to people who have a little bit more experience. And that is not to say that, you know, you as a newbie can't add something to the conversation. But, you know, sort of just yelling out immediately all the time can really have deleterious effects, you know. I think you lose a certain richness. Even if you're right, you lose a certain richness of experience when you fail to listen to other people. And that's me as a person who is, like, not super, my strengths do not lie in feeling other people's feelings, let's say. I try, as we all do, I hope. But, you know, but even I would say, you know, you miss out if you're not listening. And that's not just for everybody, that's for the individual. That's me, that's you, like the white guy, that's the, you know, the Muslim. Everyone misses out if they themselves, you know, each person, each one of us, we lose.
What did you think about all the people who compared the treatment of those rioters to the Black Lives Matter protest?
I mean, that's nobody who says that believes that in any way. I don't believe any of those people actually believe that, because it's so absurd on its face.
Like, basically, if there were Black Lives Matter people in the Capitol, it would have been a completely different.
Oh, well, that, yeah, absolutely, obviously, yeah. No, I mean, I was talking about the people who are like, you know, I'm going to pretend that this isn't serious because weren't the Democrats just doing that over the summer because of BLM, which is ridiculous. No, this is absurd. It's absurd on its face. Those people would all be dead. If I mean, I don't need to tell you that, right? It's been shown over and over again. So what
So
do you think?
are we living in two different Americas?
2 or 20 or 70 or 300 or
At this point, this is just another day in America for the
yeah.
large part.
Yeah. No, I think one of the moments in the last 4 years that really jumped out at me was uh, a friend I have that is Black said, what's happening now is not all that different from any of the last 40 years of my existence. And that was, I think, that was something that I had to hear, was like, this is not a departure. And I knew that in some ways, like I knew that, you know, Reagan had done some tremendous damage and like whatever, but I think being in a liberal enclave as we are, it's really been interesting. I mean, you guys have been sadly a view for me into that, things that I didn't see necessarily. I mean, I assumed that they were there, but there's a difference between
Yeah,
seeing,
absolutely.
right? There's a difference between seeing and assuming. I don't know that I really conveyed to you, like, so we're recording, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that experience where my kid and your kid were in school and did exactly the same little kid thing, 6 years old, 2 kids find some matches and try to start a campfire in the back of school, right? For my kid, that means one conversation from the principal, and then it's dropped. I never hear about it again. That's the end of it, right? So it was really a big deal to me when I heard that that was a thing that had come back for your son, where it was like, my kid had been the ringleader. My kid was the one who found the matches. My kid was the one who organized, you know, all the kids to come around and do that. But only one kid gets
The lasting stigma.
the lasting stigma, exactly. It's and as the parent, you know, I remember having that conversation with the principal and being like, you know, he's 6 years old, you know, he doesn't necessarily remember about the consequences of fire the way he should. I will have a conversation with him.
Yeah.
He's a 6-year-old. He's not a bad kid. He's just,
Yeah.
you know, every 6-year-old is something, you know, like these are the same kids who run into the street without looking both ways. They, you know,
Yeah.
they're kids, they're little kids. And it was really powerful for me to realize that 2-3 years later, we're still talking about your son being the problem. And my son is like, nothing, like less than nothing. And it's a microcosm, you know, it's like a very, very small view into a much bigger problem.
I wanted to show you this clip. Let me see if you can see it, okay?
Mm-hmm. I don't see anything.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
You see it now?
Yes.
It was the Kim Possible and the Raw Unstoppable on the. Hey y'all, what's up? It's Friday, so I'm gonna keep it black. But I'm not about to keep it brief. I'm just here to read these white motherfuckers at the Capitol in no particular order. It was the Kim Possible and the Raw Unstoppable on the side of the building for me. You're mad. You're so mad because you finally see what the rest of us have been trying to tell you. That the longest standing and unchecked terroristic threat in America has been white supremacists. It be your own people. Let me tell you what these good old boys meant when they said, give me liberty or give me death. Give me the liberty to be sexist, racist, xenophobic, anti-queer, and anti-anybody that don't prescribe to my transatlantic version of Christianity or off with their heads. It's either their way or the highway, but it's documented in your words that all men are created equal under God. We didn't mean that for the blacks. So now when we are using a system that you created to obtain the rights you get to experience so freely, all of a sudden it's democracy. Throw the whole thing away. So I guess you thought it was your turn to make a political statement in the street. Sir, ma'am, especially you with your, we're storming the Capitol, it's a revolution. Girl, if you look at your, do you want a revolution? Black people are in the streets protesting murder, oppression, suppression, a lack of basic human rights and equal protections under the law. And what were you showing your behinds for? Oh, to be able to murder Black people in the name of self-defense. to oppress Black people in the name of white supremacy, to suppress Black votes in the name of white political power, and to have more protections under the law than Black people in the name of white comfort. It was the noose for me. It's giving very much Civil War Confederacy vibes. Hey, the Confederacy was fighting for states' rights to own slaves. Next. A joke. And embarrassment. The crimes, trespassing, destruction of government property, mail theft, that's a felony. Entering restricted government property with a weapon, let it have been a brown man. And they brought bombs, death. Immediately, and it would have been called justice. It was the beating on the blue lives that mattered for me. I don't want to hear any comparisons about what Black people did in the summer of 2020 to what happened on January 6, 2021. Because for one thing, Black folks know how to go to somebody's house and put their feet on the table. This was baseless insurrection, anarchy, terrorism, and treason. But here's the thing, don't get me wrong. Revolutions are a natural part of history. Rulers have been usurped. Governments have been overturned, but it's always been evident and it's always been criticized when power was seized just for the sake of transferring power. Revolution has only been just and true when it's championing the oppressed. And let me tell you something, conservatives. You literally have lacked for nothing. It's in the name. Y'all conserving it for yourselves. Nothing has ever been denied to you. Your natural and civil rights have never been infringed upon. So much so that you don't even know the true definition of being oppressed, and any minor inconvenience or infringement upon your privilege would spark discontent, mayhem. White Christians. Y'all remember that scripture? One day the first shall be the last and the last shall be the first. The day has come and the girls are scared. I guess they didn't think it would come so soon. Oh, they've only been 400 years in power. You broke into a government building. Negroes could never. It was the police letting the gates open for me. And not only did you make it out alive, you made it home to see your children. Oh, but the Black Panthers stormed the California State Capitol in 1967 with their assault rifles. Yes, honey, and they were allowed to. Entering government buildings with weapons did not become illegal until 1995 after the Oklahoma City bombing. The most devastating act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history, by the way. And guess who did it? 2 white boys. Had this exact situation been flipped, and we would have been protesting the result, and mind you, we would not have been protesting because we lost. We would have been protesting because we knew it would have meant the continued empowerment of violent racism. It would have been a massacre, but you knew that. White supremacists treat America like a woman, a white woman specifically, something to be defended and honored beyond reproach, and whose honor needs to be protected by any means necessary. And can't nobody disrespect America and get away with it except white men. And Dr. Brittany Cooper took it a step further. She called Trump an abuser, but I call white supremacy the abuser. And we all know the most dangerous time for a woman in an abusive relationship is when she decides to leave. And because America is starting to leave white supremacy behind, white supremacy is acting up. The tea is hot today. He lost. You lost. It's over. You're done. Listen. Come close. The chasm between rhetoric and reality obviously doesn't exist for you people. And the way y'all will walk down the steps kindly after your act of terrorism shows that you won't know the difference anytime soon. It was the guns being pointed directly at aggressive mobs who intended to cause harm but not being fired for me. And that's the thing. Black people don't wish death on you. As much as we should be able to, we don't. We just wish we would be treated the same way when we're fighting for our rights. I need a refill. So white liberals, don't think I forgot about you. This is your mess to clean up. We don't want to see any more Black people cleaning up the mess of irresponsible, unhinged, racist white people. So unbuckle those cufflinks, take off those suit jackets from Macy's, kick off those so-called Louboutins, and don't be afraid to get a run in your stockings. Put in some elbow grease and scrub that shit up yourself. Call them what they are, terrorists. Lock them up. We want federal charges and convictions for everybody, including Donald Trump. Hey, y'all, what's up? It's Friday, so I'm gonna
She said a lot, right?
She's not wrong. She's not wrong about any of that.
I'm still just like, it's to me that like that's just one event, but like it's like the day after those mass shootings in the kindergarten.
Yeah.
Like we have a way of just kind of like moving on, like the next day is just a new day.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the thing that makes it hard for me to get too emotional about any one thing is because the next day it just keeps going, There's another broadcast, even though we are repairing it, I don't get the sense that America now has woken up and this is a new day in America and this won't happen again because we really now see the error in our ways. Mm-hmm. And I don't get that sense. I think that's just like, these people are still there, right? The 60 million people.
There's no remorse. There's no remorse at all. I mean, I think it's really important. We have the benefit of having Germany as a precursor, right? We have a model for like as bad as it could have been, and like what you do afterward. And I think it's really, I think it's important to note how, because of the seriousness of World War II and the Holocaust, you know, Germans were unable to walk away from the grim reality, right? And the part that they all played as a whole in this, you know, massacre, this genocide. And I think, you know, even though they do still have, you know, as every country does, as every place does, you know, the white supremacy and oppression, they've managed to keep it to a manageable minority, I think, because they don't ever seem to let that fester. There's never a sense that they can just sort of pretend it didn't happen, right? And I think that seriousness of saying, yes, we did this, all of us together, not just the war criminals in the Hague, but all of us did this. If we hadn't all worked together to do this, it never would have happened. And they did a sort of amazing job of standing in front of all of their crimes and the genocide and saying, this is our problem, all of our problems. And you don't see that here. You don't see that in terms of slavery. You don't see that in terms of, you know, the Civil War. You don't see that, you know, I mean, people are like, oh, well, slavery was over, you know, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, redlining happened, you know, 80 years ago. Jim Crow didn't stop until 40 years ago. Black people are still being murdered in their beds. You're like, I don't, you know, until we all can say this is part of all of us, you know, even the nice people.
Technically, you're saying that, you know, the Black Holocaust hasn't ended.
It hasn't ended. It hasn't ended. And part of the reason it hasn't ended is because we have failed to stare ourselves in the face and say, this is us. You know, all these people saying, well, this is not America. This isn't who we are. Come on. Like, it demonstrably is. It definitely 100% is. You know, and I think I was too optimistic. I would include myself in that. I was too optimistic. I thought, you know, demography is changing. You know, all these terrible baby boomers are beginning to die, thank God. And, you know, we can all sort of move on from this collective horror show. But it's not, you know, it's not true. It's just not true. We still have this rabid, you know, these soldiers for Christ, who, you know, has nothing to do with Christ. It's literally, you might as well just be saying for Hitler.
Now these white supremacists, I know it's wrapped up in a lot of things, right? Mm. So they were Trump supporters, and Trump subversively kind of believed in white supremacy. He never said it directly, but it's implied, and most people understood.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to be a kind of a dummy to not see it. Like, it's not subtle. It's not subtle at all.
So basically, they were upset that their leader wasn't going to stay in office.
I mean, I don't have the quote in front of me, but
this is the general idea.
Yeah,
they were trying to get Trump to continue to be the president because he actually won.
I mean, that's nonsense.
But that's the idea.
It's the idea, but it's a thin veneer over just saying basically it's ours, it belongs to us. You don't get it. You don't get our thing.
And so I can imagine as the average Trump supporter would say, those people in the Capitol don't represent me.
Right.
The people in the Capitol were this 1% of 1% crazos.
Right.
That's the idea.
Which, you know, I think you and I can certainly understand that.
But underlying, they were Trump supporters, but they were gonna stay Americans. They weren't gonna do any of those things. That was just a small few.
Glasses. Hang on just a second. Yeah, I think
She's paused. Get her connection together.